Okay, sounds good.
Okay, so we're recording. So, hey, Amanda, it looks like you were wrapping up your unit on how the Native Americans lived in the Santa Monica Mountains. And you can say it's like a tongue twister being from Sacramento. Duh.
Yeah.
But it looks like the kids really enjoyed the whole process.
Yeah,
And
it was really fun. It was
yeah.
a good amount of prep to make those booklets, but I think it was worth it, and they were really excited to be.
Yeah, the booklets were great. It was something that you and I had talked about, and then I was so excited when I saw it come to life. You know, there's the books that we talked about before. It was just an idea, and then there they are. So that was
Yeah, and
really
I really appreciated your ideas for creating the binding. I had already bought all the materials to try the
right.
pencil binding, so I figured I'd give it a shot, and I was so surprised. I had never seen it before, but it worked.
Yeah. So that whole thing was great because that way they really have something tangible to take home and remember and share with their family. So that was cool. Okay, well, for this, you sent me two videos that your assistant had videotaped you doing sort of a discussion, a group discussion assessment and an individual assessment based on what the students remembered about what it was like for the Native Americans to survive in the Santa Monica Mountains and through the projects that you guys did. And those are really creative projects. So we'll start by talking about the first recording, which was the group discussion. And I just have in my notes here that what the classroom was, the classroom environment was out of doors, which is where they learned everything. So that was great. And I guess there were about maybe 8 students or maybe 10.
There were, roughly 8 to 10.
Okay. Seated on a blanket in a circle, and there was one girl who was part of the circle, but she was kind of lying down. So that was a kind of something that I noticed that was interesting. Mm-hmm. So to start the dialogue, I just kind of made some notes here about what you said and what they said, and I just wanted to back up. So you asked me to look for student engagement and your student management, as well as staff management. So those are the things that I was looking for, and I made some notes on that periodically. Okay. And so you started off the whole process with establishing and reinforcing the protocol for being able to take your turn to speak, and you were always telling them to raise their hand. So the first thing you said was, raise your hand if you can tell me what project we did to show how the Native Americans survived in the Santa Monica Mountains. And about 4 or 5 students raised their hand, and you called on one of the students, which was great, and then you told another student that they would be next. And I like that because that keeps them focused. It's like they have to hold that thought because they're going to be next. So that was great. And there was that student who, Isabel, was lying on the ground, and she was kind of, lounging, not disrupting, but kind of just because she was lying down. And the staff actually pointed it out first, and he said, it looks like you need to be listening to Amanda. Are you listening? And so that was great that he was taking that upon himself. And then I noticed that she did need some redirecting as far as how she needed to behave. So you asked the staff to take her to get a jacket because she looked cold. And what I thought that was interesting because you were showing sort of a logical consequence or a logical solution to, okay, if you look cold, you should get a jacket. And so maybe she'll take that logic back in her mind and go, okay, next time I come to this circle, I'm going to be appropriately dressed. Because it really did look cold. Everybody else had like sweaters on, and she had like almost a bathing suit.
It was so cold. She was totally in a bathing suit at the ocean on a day when it rained. And I was like, before we sat down in the circle, I was like, you look, kind of cold. You need to put some different clothes on, or maybe just a sweatshirt. She was like, no, I'm okay.
Yeah.
I thought, okay, like we all need to learn our lessons. But
exactly.
Then when I saw her kind of huddling into herself on the blanket, I was like, I don't think she's really sleepy. I think this is like cold.
Okay. And in denial, like, like kids will do. And I thought that was great. And then you also, as you were talking to her, you said, could you get your jacket and come back to the group and sit on your bottom? Because that shows you can't just come back to the group. You have to come back to the group appropriately. So that's always being reinforced, and that's what you do, and that's great. So the staff went ahead and helped her with that. And one of the students mentioned, after you asked the question again, how did the Native Americans, what's one of the projects they did that we did? And one of the students said picking up trash. And so, you kind of took the students and you engaged them in a mini dialogue and said, well, did the Native Americans have, Snickers bar wrappers? No. Did they have plastic toys? No. Did they have plastic bags? No. So basically they're like, okay, no, they didn't do that.
Well, I think I want to add something, because I realized that, one of our projects did include picking up the trash, but it wasn't exactly tied to the Native American unit. And I think it was my fault for confusing them, but it fit our program organically because we had switched locations from the mountains where we were doing the prickly pear jam and the acorn pancakes. And then we went to the beach, and that was part of our schedule, was to go to the beach because we go to different places outdoors. And when we got to the beach, there was just so much trash because of all of the storms. Mm-hmm. So that's when I decided, this is a great time to kind of take a break from our unit to incorporate, like, we did trash treasures, and we did recycling, and what goes in the recycling bin, what goes in the trash bin.
Oh, okay. Right.
Art. Yeah, so there was
you're respecting the environment just like the Native Americans would have respected the environment to keep it neat and clean, and but that makes sense. So, but
I should definitely told.
Watching the whole dialogue of these kids at this age, it just sort of reinforces that, like, their brain just doesn't necessarily either remember things in the same way that you would think that your questions addressed.
Not at all.
So we'll get to that later. Okay. So I like that mini lesson. And so then you said, what did they do for food? And some students started talking out, grass and stuff like that. And then you said, well, some of them might have eaten grass, but what's the project that we did that the Native Americans did to survive? And one student shouted out, I know. So again, but then you're reinforcing, raise your hand. And then you said, I'm going to move to Logan. Remember to raise your hand. And Logan said, sour grass? So they're not getting off that grass thing, because I think you're trying to get a different project that you guys had done. And then Connor, you said, Connor, can you share a project that we did? And he explained the Native American water filtration process to filter water for drinking. And it wasn't very loud, so I like the idea how you re-explained it loudly and simply for the rest of the students to hear, as well as me, because I couldn't quite hear it over the audio. And I thought that was great. And then let's see, Gregory raised his hand, and you said, Gregory, why don't you share your answer, because your hand is raised. So that was really good. And then he also explained the water filtration process in a different way, and then you retold that to the group for him. So that was great. And then because the students were really having a hard time remembering some of the projects, you did this really cool exercise in which you had them close their eyes and try to remember the first place that you went with them on an Everwild trip for the Native Americans when the leaves were falling and stuff like that, and try to remember where we were and what we were doing there. And I think you may have been trying to get, was it the acorn gathering thing? Mm-hmm. That you were trying to get them to do? Okay, so then is it Evan or Yvonne?
Emmett. I think it was Emmett.
And Emmett. Okay, Emmett raised his hand, and you said, I'd like to hear from Emmett because he's raising his hand. And he said he didn't have an answer after all. But that was good, though. Okay. Now, I was wondering about the girl to your right who had a green dress on, and she was sitting down, unless that was Isabella after she came back. I couldn't tell. But she raised her hand a few times, but you didn't call on her. So I didn't know if there was a reason behind that or what.
I'm trying to remember who it was.
And she was sitting, I think there were maybe two boys to your right. To your right, there were two boys, and then I think, and then there was her, and she had a green dress on, sort of lightish brown hair. But anyway, you can look at the video again to see, kind of look at it and say, well, why she had her hand raised, but maybe somebody else was first. I don't know, but I just wasn't sure why she wasn't called on.
Okay, I'll have to double check.
Okay.
Maybe I didn't see it.
Okay.
I
and
feel like
then, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
Oh, okay. So then you were trying to get the students to remember the acorn leaching process, and you asked them, does everyone remember what we were doing with the big jug of water that we poured over the acorns before we put the batter into the pan? And the students started talking out. And then, is it Jackson or Jason?
Was it Kingston?
Kingston, sorry.
No,
Kingston,
it's okay.
You called on Kingston, but he didn't have a complete answer. So you said, Logan, can you help him out? And I thought that was a really cool peer teaching experience.
Thank you.
I don't know if Logan really helped him out, though, but it was a good idea.
I'm not sure, but I noticed that the last time the last few times that I've done lessons and called upon Kingston, he either said skip or I don't know, or he just wasn't very involved. So I was trying to incorporate ways that he could participate. And then kind of praise him for his participation as well.
Right, that makes sense. That's a good idea. I like that a lot. And then you clarified the concept of leaching the tannins out of the acorns, of the acorn meal, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, and
then you went right to the book project, but I wasn't sure if the video was turned off and on again, because it seemed really abrupt that you started passing out the books right away.
So that I had to take a break because one of our kids gets picked up by a different group and gets brought home. So Emmett actually had to leave. So we had to pause to sign him out with the other the founder of the preschool. Was bringing him home. So, and it was kind of a long process where he was getting his backpack and everyone was like, can I get water? Can I go to the bathroom? So
okay.
Take a break.
Well, that was really good because I didn't even notice that when the camera turned back on again, the kids may have been in a different position or something, because it looked like it was the same. So that was pretty good trick photography. So then I have to ask you, because I was going to suggest, and maybe you did it, that at the end of that group discussion, did you do a wrap up, or did you just say, okay, guys, we got to go? Well, maybe you couldn't because the guy had to go.
No, I guess my wrap up or my transition into the project was more so handing out the books. And before giving them any instruction, I said, let's refresh our memory on the projects that we did, because they really were having a hard time remembering, because we had done the projects over the past, 3-4 months. So all of these projects were really put together into this booklet, and they had a hard time going back more than just one project. So as soon as I said, let's go through these books and refresh our memories by looking at the pictures. And there's a picture of every single one of them working on the project. And they were really excited to realize that the pictures were of them and their friends. And then they started to kind of remember, and then they pointed out which one their favorite one was. And that was I think
no, I think that's great. I was going to say that as an activity wrap up after the discussion, before you pass the books out, I wondered if it could have been an idea, say, we did this project, and we did that project, and we did that project, kind of before you pass the books out, so that way they're listening to you.
Got it. That makes sense.
And then if you had more time, you could have had additional dialogues saying, now tell me more about that project. What did you like about it? Going into every different one.
Totally, yes. I should have probably just held on to one book and then.
Yeah. So part of it, that's what I was thinking. And I have some notes at the end for that. And that is, now that you know that these kids at this age, if you're going to do this unit again, might not remember in the same way you want them to, it might have been helpful to have pictures, just of the main projects posted on a poster board,
True.
Holding it up.
Okay. That makes sense.
Not necessarily the book. At first I was thinking, well, if you had your own book and they didn't have their books, you could show the projects, but then they'd be paying too much attention to their friends in the picture.
Right. But just the project itself.
Yeah, just the project itself, or another, maybe not just so much, not them in the project, but just showing the project itself, because that could be like a memory trigger for them.
Definitely.
And then going to the book, before you pass the books out, I thought it might be a good idea to talk about, just to discuss briefly what the purpose of is behind the books and what they contain, right before you start passing them out. Because then once you start passing them out, they're not going to listen to anything.
Yeah, I realize
just because of past experience on that. And then, let's see, so you said, I'm going to pass out your books. Does everyone have a book? Now, take a few seconds to go through the pages. Did everybody get a chance to look at the books? And then all the students were really engaged looking at the pictures, looking at the books. They were just riveted. I think they were pretty excited about that. So that was great student engagement there. And then you said, what's the name of your favorite project? And they began to talk out, but you said, don't say it out loud, write it down. So then I was thinking, did you establish the protocol for, okay, we're not going to have, this is not a group discussion. I just want you to think about this because we're only going to be writing our answers in the book. Mm-hmm. Did you take an opportunity to maybe let them know this is not a group discussion, this is only a writing activity?
Well, I actually didn't tell them that it wasn't a group discussion.
Oh.
I did encourage them to go to the last page. I had them, I don't know if I cut that part out of the video by accident,
Okay.
but I had to go to the very last page. And I said, here are your vocabulary words. And these are the words
okay.
you use to complete the second to last page. So they were already on the last page. I said, okay, everyone flip one page back. And then I read the first question to them and said, okay, the answer to this question is on your vocabulary page.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that wasn't in the video. So that, yeah. Okay,
cool.
Sorry.
And then
no problem.
I also told them to let me know if they needed a trace, because that was one thing they kept saying out loud was, I don't know how to write. I don't know how to write.
Right. I noticed a girl said, I don't know how to read, or I can't write. Yeah. And you said, well, don't worry, I'll help you. And, but that was already explained before.
Okay.
It just wasn't in the video, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. I didn't.
Okay. No problem. I just have these questions. Okay, great. And then I have kind of an overall observation write-up for that, just basically the things that we had talked about. And then you had your individual assessment with a guy who really, really enjoyed the Acorn project. And so you just did this one-on-one discussion with him in the same setting as the other one. And you used the book as a visual aid, but you didn't really need it that much because he just wanted to talk about the process of making the pancakes. Mm-hmm. So you asked him, what was your favorite project? And he said, pancakes. And I thought, okay, so is that kind of that one-word answer? Does that show that he knows that this came from like a Native American survival? I mean, just because the one-word answer, I just want to make sure that that's acceptable to you.
The vocabulary list had acorn pancakes.
Okay.
But I kind of knew what he was saying.
Yeah,
so
of course.
I let it slide to see, knowing that the next question went further in depth.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, and then you went into the process, which was really cool. And you said, what was your favorite part about the process? And I like that, how you asked that, because then it makes him think, okay, this was a process. And I have to think, okay, this was like step by step. What was it about making the pancakes? It wasn't just the end result, but what did I like about actually doing it? You said, what was the two? Oh no, he said he liked cracking the acorns. That was his favorite part. Okay. And you said, what was one tool that that you used for that process? And he said, a mortar and pestle. So that's the part I was actually referring to, was the part of the process. And it makes him think, okay, this was a process, and that's cool. and you asked him, did the Native Americans have a mortar and pestle, and he said no, and you said, what might they have used instead? And he said a round rock. And so you said, right, they didn't have a mortar and pestle. And he said, no, they had a makeshift one made out of stone. And I thought, whoa, that's a really advanced phrase for a kid that young. Yeah. A makeshift one. Very good. And then, and then you said, what did we use to prepare our acorn pancake batter? And he said a sifter, and you asked him if the Native Americans had a sifter, and no, and he said no. And then you asked him the last question about why was it important for the Native Americans to make pancakes, and he said so they could survive. So I thought that was great. So that really did show that he learned at least one method of survival. That you can survive on acorns if you know how to leach them and go through the whole process. That's great. Yeah, and you complimented him on his writing in his book, and I think that kind of praise is really great for kids. So good job doing that. So that's all I have to say about it. I would just and even though you may have done it when the camera was off, the transitions is something that's always really important to be working on. For everyone, for all of us.
True.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
You bet. I'm going to turn this off now.